This is Leverkusen's results map for 2023-24. All greens and oranges, but one ugly red mark. One match from perfection. Alonso's Leverkusen stood mere minutes away from achieving the feat, not just going unbeaten in the league, not just the league and cup, but across all competitions. But Gasparini's Atalanta side crushed Alonso's hope, as the Italian not only beat this unstoppable Leverkusen side, he made them look toothless and lifeless. This is exactly how he did it. The first advantage that Gasparini had is that his side naturally uses a back three formation, the perfect setup to match up to Alonso's own back three. But Alonso, who this season has been near faultless in his decision making, made a curious choice, starting Amin Adli at the tip of his attack rather than Patrick Schick or Victor Boniface, and Atalanta took charge of the game from the start. In the first 15 minutes, Atalanta barely had any of the ball, and yet they were in control of the game. Where the Leverkusen centre-backs are so often 3 versus 2 up, meaning they always have a free man, normally a wide centre-back who can then move up the pitch, this match was different. Rather than being passive with his defenders to form a back 5, Gasparini was aggressive with his men. The front 3 would be man-to-man on the Leverkusen centre-backs immediately, and where Grimaldo in particular usually looks to push ultra high on the left to attack. The pressure on his centre-backs was so high that he had to move deep to be an option. But Atalanta was set on suffocating Leverkusen, and their wingbacks were hot on the heels of Leverkusen's. The final key to the Atalanta press came in the form of Edison and Coop miners, who would then go pivot to pivot with Leverkusen. But Gasparini was playing with fire. One wrong move, one crafty turn by Xhaka or Palacios, and they would have broken the press and would have an immediate numerical advantage against the backline. But that moment never came. Atalanta's press was perfect, never giving Leverkusen space. What it meant is that whether Leverkusen were high up or still early in their build-up phase, the centre-backs were playing passes under pressure, increasing the odds of playing a sloppy ball into an Atalanta man. But even if the central midfielders were receiving the ball, there was 0% chance of them receiving while facing the Atalanta goal, and they would often be forced to play backwards, completely cutting off the supply to Leverkusen's front line. But Leverkusen could not simply spend the entirety of the game looking backwards due to the Gasparini pressure. This meant that their pivots had to take more risks, whether it was trying to force a turn or to play intricate 1-2s between themselves and the forwards, or between each other. But this played straight into the Atalanta plan, and their pivots were on the front foot, ready to intercept any errant passes, allowing them to win the ball back and bypass the Leverkusen midfield line, allowing them to attack the centre-backs again and again. And the stats back this up, as Xhaka, so often the calm head, was less secure in possession than ever. In fact, the only surprise was that no goals came directly as a result of the Gasparini press. Alonso was searching for solutions. With the midfield cut off and the pressure mounting, Leverkusen started going long more often, and this was a ploy that Alonso would wish that Leverkusen leaned into more, as after the match he stated. But the thing is, Leverkusen did play long. In fact, more than a few long balls, with the centre-backs going long much more than they usually do. The difference was, it was the Atalanta pressure forcing them long, rather than Leverkusen choosing to look for the long balls. And the accuracy of these longer passes was low, with Atalanta often winning the aerials. And this was a rare instance of Alonso misreading the game. Amin Adli began the match as the more diminutive, agile forward, looking to provide a different element to the match through his movement. But despite Adli putting up an admirable aerial performance, with Leverkusen constantly being forced into these long balls and Victor Boniface and Patrick Schick watching on from the bench, the lack of presence became more and more apparent, and Leverkusen would pay for this dearly. Leverkusen set up for the build-up, and the tireless Atalanta front 3 were already positioned, ready to press, with even Grimaldo being followed deep by his opposite number, and the pivots backing this up. With limited options, Bayer Leverkusen went long to Adli, and this was one of the rare occasions he got his head to the ball first. But as a non-target man, his misplaced header fell straight to Lookman. Lookman, a man possessed in this game, eased past Xhaka to produce an outstanding finish. But you don't go almost the entire season unbeaten if you're not a special team. And there was a reason for Alonso's attacking setup. When Atalanta went pivot to pivot, with Frimpong and Adli threatening to run in behind, the space between the backline and the midfield line could continue to grow. The asymmetric lineup from Leverkusen was designed to take advantage of the space. Rather than simply having a flatter front 3 or Wirtz behind a front 2, Frimpong tended to hold the width. So now, not only would Wirtz have the potential to drop deep, with Frimpong holding the width, Stanisic inverted aggressively into this region, looking for the room. But a key concept to Gasparini being the man to finally break the Alonso hoodoo is the trust he put in all 11 of his players, and this trust extended to the backline, with his centre-backs being completely flexible in their man-to-man orientation when man-marking the Leverkusen forwards. So it was never just about one man following Wirtz deep and the rest trying to compact the space. All three centre-backs were completely fixed on their men. I mean, just look at Hien picking up Wirtz in the left-back region, then being completely transfixed on his man across the pitch. In fact, the rare occasion he takes his man off of Wirtz, Leverkusen almost get in. Speaking of Hien, his matchup against Adli was one of the keys to the match, as he was strong enough to outmatch Adli physically, so the Leverkusen forward had no chance of holding off the centre-back. But to make matters worse, Hien was matching him in a foot race, so Adli couldn't even take advantage of the room created behind the backline. So the centre-back was effectively winning the 1v1 battle in every way possible. The knock-on effect of this 1v1 was Gym City could follow Wirtz deep to shut him down and reduce his effectiveness. But Leverkusen was spotting weaknesses in the Atalanta defense. The man-to-man orientation meant that the back three would often be as lopsided as Leverkusen's front three, resulting in chasms opening up in central regions. Though Adli was not the man to step up and take advantage of this room, Leverkusen had other routes. Stanisic's novel out to in runs meant on rare occasions he could look to be the third man runner, but Leverkusen just never released him at the appropriate moment. But Jeremy Frimpong down the right was perfectly positioned. Not only had he isolated the wide centre-back in Kolasinac, the other forwards had created room in the defence, and that, paired with the vertical space created by the Atalanta backline, meant that he was perfectly positioned to make the run in behind and be one of the few players to cause tangible danger. The game would change in the second half, but to get to there, we also have to acknowledge how effective Atalanta were in possession. If Atalanta were matching Bayer Leverkusen man-to-man out of possession, why couldn't Leverkusen just employ a similar strategy when they were defending? Gasparini was a step ahead in this regard. Firstly, their wingbacks could be more aggressive, and Zappacosta in particular pushed high, and this meant that Lookman and De Ketelaere would not be holding the width and instead be buzzing around Scamacca. The Leverkusen front three were then positioned to go man-to-man against the back three, but crucially, Kolasinac tended to move wider at times, dragging Frimpong with him, and a pivot, usually Edison, would drop into the backline. With Leverkusen only using a double pivot, if they kept a man-to-man orientation, the remaining man would be left with an absolute expanse to defend. Crucially, the makeup of the Atalanta front three helped their cause. Scamacca was able to hold off his opposite number when required, but Charles De Ketelaere was happy to drop in to try and cause the overload, as was Lookman. Lookman in particular posed a problem, as when he dropped deep and dragged in the centre-back, he had more than enough space to run in behind and get on the end of a long ball. Add to that, whenever Atalanta were high up the pitch, their focus was on trying to attempt as many shots as possible, and they took just as many shots as Leverkusen, despite having a fraction of the possession. This was helped by trying to get the ball wide quickly, supported by the attacking wingbacks, which allowed their front three to be focused on attacking the box high up rather than making connections deep. Leverkusen's improved performance in the second half was down to the substitutions, which might fill Alonso with regret, as Boniface made an impact when he came on, with Frimpong moving to wingback on paper. Despite being there on paper, Frimpong's positioning barely changed, staying high and wide down the right-hand side. This had the advantage of now keeping the three forwards in close proximity, opening up the potential for combination play. The reason Alonso did not start with this particular combination was also made obvious, as on the transition, Tapsoba found himself being isolated more and more. But what Boniface brought was the ability to hold off his centre-backs, so now when Leverkusen were pressed into going long, they had a much better chance of holding onto the ball. Moreover, in open play, when Atalanta were in their isolated positions, if Leverkusen were able to work the ball into Boniface, he had the ability to hold off Hien and allow the rest of the side to join the forwards or play 1-2s around the Atalanta centre-backs. This was made even more effective as Boniface is not just a static big target man. He's more than technical enough to link with the midfield as well. So now Leverkusen had three players who at any moment could drop deep or spin in behind, creating chaos in the Atalanta defense. It was domination from Atalanta, and as you can tell, Gasparini was absolutely delighted with the trophy. Okay, so maybe delighted is the wrong word. A stunning season for Leverkusen, approaching perfection, but not quite. But if you want to see the in-depth tactics that made this Leverkusen season go down in history, check out this video right here.